You're listening to the Do Something More podcast, and this is episode 2 with Judy Draper and the work she does with the humanitarian organization Quilts for Comfort. Welcome to the Do Something More podcast, a service-oriented show where we highlight the helpers who inspire us all to do something more. I'm your host, Melissa Draper. Thank you so much for being here. All right, we're here for another episode of Do Something More. Actually, this is our first episode, and I have with me today, I started off this podcast the right way with my mother-in-law. So that's how we're starting this off today. I love my mother-in-law. She's a great woman. Her name is Judy Draper. She's the mother of 6 and grandmother of 25. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the reason I've chosen to do my mother-in-law is she has been part of a humanitarian sewing group for the last 15 years. And the name of that group is Quilts for Comfort. And even in addition to that group, she's always loved sewing since she was a little girl. She's made many things for my family and for others in our family and in the community. And so today we're going to focus on what her humanitarian group, Quilts for Comfort, does. So I just want to start off by saying thank you for joining me on the show, Judy.
Well, it's just a real pleasure to be here. And I am anxious to tell everyone about what we do.
Wonderful. Well, we're anxious to all hear about what you do. So I would love for you to start off exactly what does Quilts for Comfort do, and how did you get involved with that group yourself?
Well, Quilts for Comfort is actually, is actually a recent name. Originally, we just called ourselves our humanitarian group. And we were originally sponsored by our church, but we invite the people from the community to join us. And originally, we did quilts and other items for people overseas. Then all the things we made were shipped overseas. And so we had specific sizes that we had to make and certain parameters we had to follow. And then everything was shipped from Salt Lake City to places like Africa. It was then decided that it would be more helpful to those people if they, instead of sending the quilts ready-made, if they sent them sewing machines so they could make their own quilts and have little cottage industries. And so our whole parameter changed, and we now make all of our items for local charities. So rather than being sent to Salt Lake City, they stay here in the Boise Valley. And we make quilts, everything for hospitals, nursing homes, shelters, schools, fire departments, police departments, anyone that has a need for a warm quilt.
I love that. And thank you for mentioning that. I didn't say that in the beginning, that you're located in the Boise, Idaho area, and that's mainly where you serve. So how is this group run? Do you meet on a weekly basis? Do you meet, how do you function and organize yourselves?
Well, we do meet weekly. We meet for 2 hours every Wednesday. And our church actually sponsors us, and they provide the funds for the batting that we use in the quilts. Everything else is donated. The community has totally risen to the occasion, and we have never in 15 years even come close to running out of fabric or thread or yarn. We have always had everything we need. And it's just amazing how blessed we've been and how people have just stepped up and always helped us.
Yeah, you've shared with me some of those stories of how you've gotten those donations or how sometimes they've come at the most opportune times when you needed them. Do you want to share one of those with us right now?
Sure. One in particular that I can think of, I had been online looking for places that needed quilts. And I discovered by going on a website called Just Serve that one of the local hospitals, St. Luke's, had a hospice department that was requesting lap quilts for their patients. And they particularly wanted patriotic themed lap quilts. They give them to many of their patients are veterans. And so they would give them to these veterans. And then when they passed away, they wanted to give the quilt to the veteran's family. And so we told them that we really didn't have any patriotic fabric as such, but we'd be happy to make quilts in red, white, and blue, make them as patriotic as we could. And they said that would be fine, and they would really appreciate that. So the following week, when I went to our regular meeting on Wednesday, there was a new lady there. And she came up to me and said, I've got a box of fabric that I don't think I'm ever going to use. Could I donate it to you? And I said, of course, we always take fabric. And she said, great. So the next Wednesday, she brought a box. And as I opened it, I was absolutely stunned to see an entire box of patriotic fabric. And it was exactly what we needed for the need at the time. And it's just been amazing how we always seem to have what we need.
You always seem to see that kind of repeat itself over the years, depending on what project you're doing or what you're working on, that those things get provided. It's amazing how that works. So you mentioned that you, on that instance that you use Just Serve to find a project to do. What are some of the other ways? How do you find the projects or decide as a group the things that you're going to work on to make and to distribute?
Well, some of it is by word of mouth. People just hear about what we do and let us know that they could use quilts. For example, we provided quilts for 2 nursing homes recently. That was just one of our members just happened to be talking to a lady that worked at one of the nursing homes, and so it was simply by word of mouth. But we also have someone some time ago put together a list of all the service opportunities. This is other than Just Serve, service opportunities in the valley. And we went through it, and several of them requested bedding and quilts. And so we just contact those people and see what they need. Also, there's a shelter in the Boise Valley that is called the Rescue Mission. And every year, twice a year, they have one of the local radio hosts takes an entire week and promotes the Boise Rescue Mission and asking for donations of all kinds. So I thought, well, since they have these people coming into their shelters where they try to rehabilitate them, I called them to see if they could use quilts for their beds. And they emailed me back and said, yes, could you give us 45 quilts?
Wow.
And since then, we have provided probably 60 or 70 quilts for them, and we are continuing to do so.
Wow. Wow. So really all sorts of projects that you've done. Do you ever have a favorite, or do you have one that particularly stands out to you, or of ones that you've worked on?
Well, I think probably my favorite is the rescue mission, because they are just so appreciated. Whenever we take quilts in, they tell us how much they appreciate having them, how much they love the colorful quilts on their beds. And just the other day, as we delivered some, the fellow told my husband about a homeless man who had come in, and they gave him a quilt, and he had actually brought him to tears because he'd never had anything that nice. And so I think that's probably one of our favorite places to take them.
That's great. So I think something that's unique about your group is many times those doing humanitarian work or service interact directly lots of times with those who are recipients of that service. But with your quilts, you probably don't often see those that are receiving what you do. Is there something that you do, or is there a way that you keep all of those faces and people in mind as you're working and making these, or is it mostly stories like that get passed down to you? How do you do that, or that it stays that you see those you're serving and the benefits of it?
Well, we don't always get to see those that we're serving.
Right.
We just take the quilts and just know that they're being put to good use. But my husband, who helps me deliver the quilts, often takes pictures of the people, at least that are receiving them. Not the people that necessarily use them, but the ones that are receiving them. And so we keep a scrapbook. We keep a scrapbook of all the quilts we've made, and we have it among those a lot of the pictures of the places that we take them and the people who receive them. And we have also thank you notes that they write to us, and we keep those in our scrapbook. And so, like I say, many of the quilts and things that we put out, we really don't know who they go to. We just know that they're going where they're needed. Where they're going
to do good. I love that idea of a scrapbook for your organization. Have you done that the whole 15 years, or has that been more of a recent in the last few years?
Actually, it's more recent. It's been probably the last 3 or 4 years that we've started keeping a scrapbook. Up to that point, all we kept was a record of how many quilts we made each year and where they went. But now we actually have pictures of the quilts and pictures of some of the places that we take them. And so that just gives us a nice record, and we can look through, and it's a lot of memories. And we have we did donate one quilt to the local veterans organization, American Legion, so that they could use it for a raffle, money raiser. Oh. And so we have a picture of us that being presented to the head of the American Legion, and they're holding up the quilt. And so all of those things just kind of give us some memories of the things that we do. Now, it isn't just quilts that we make. That's mostly what we do. But we also have ladies that crochet, and they make what are called fidget mats for memory care patients at nursing homes, which are always really appreciated. And we have another lady that crochets winter hats, which we take to the schools, because so often they have students that come with nothing on their heads in the dead of winter, and they're going out for recess, and they can give them those hats so that they have them. So those are some of the other things we make also.
I love that. I love how what you do just covers so many different areas and facets of life. There's really so many things that you can do with that gift of sewing. How many? So you mentioned you have some that crochet as well, but usually, how many women over the 15 years on average have you had in this group?
Well, on a weekly basis, we'll probably average 25 that come. Sometimes we'll have as few as 15. Sometimes we'll have as many as 30 or 40 show up, but I'd say on average probably about 20, 25 people. And some sew, some tie the quilt, some cut the fabric into squares, some iron for us, just any of those things that we need done. We have people, volunteers that come and help us. Those that come on a regular basis, so there's probably about 20, I would say, that come regularly. And they're the ones that have been coming for quite a while, the last several years.
I'm sure you've all built some bonds and friendships together, working together that long.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, we've become very good friends, and it's just fun to do things together. For example, this next week, we received a huge donation from a man whose wife passed away, and she had been an avid quilter. And so he found out by word of mouth that we had our organization and needed fabric. So he offered to donate some of her fabric to us. So we went over, met him actually at a storage unit to pick up the fabric, and he had 30 containers of fabric. And so we are meeting. There's about 6 of us that are going to meet together this Wednesday, bring a lunch, and we're going to go through all those boxes and sort out all this fabric and see what's there. And that's just going to be kind of a fun thing that we do as a group and as friends.
So how is that? I'm not a sewer or a quilter myself. So how is that when you're getting fabric like that from so many places? How do you go through using that for designs or deciding what goes where, or do they just kind of come together as you're creating and you think about the projects you're doing? What is the thought process that goes into all of that and designing and making a quilt?
Well, we have probably, let's see, about 4 women that make quilt tops on a regular basis, and they make them at home. They don't make them there on Wednesday. And they just take the squares that are cut out and take them home, and using their own creativity, just come up with a quilt top. And most of our quilts are twin size, but we do everything from twin to baby quilts, crib size quilts, and trying to think what they're called, the in between size, the throw size quilts. Mm-hmm. And so it's pretty much up just to the lady that's making the quilt top. She comes up with her own designs, and sometimes it's just a bunch of squares sewn together, but sometimes it's really quite unique patterns. So it's just up to the individuals that are making the quilt tops how they want to do it. We just provide the fabric.
Right. I love that. So I want to switch gears just for a minute, because quilting and sewing is something that you've done for a long time, even before this. It's been part of your life. I just want to hear a little bit about that, about your love of sewing and how you've been able to take that love to now transform it into this group or to serve those around you.
Well, I actually started sewing when I was about 6 or 7 years old. My mother put a needle in my hand and showed me how to make something for my dolls. And I went from sewing those by hand. I finally graduated to her little portable Singer sewing machine. And by the time I was 12 years old, I was making a lot of my own clothes. And I just took to it. It just seemed like a natural thing. And I've loved sewing ever since. I made lots of clothes for my family after I was married, for our children. But then I kind of graduated from sewing clothes to sewing quilts. Sewing clothes was no longer economically advantageous. And so I took my love for sewing and started making quilt tops. And so I joined this group about 15 years ago, and just went in doing whatever they needed done. And we've just worked up and kept this organization going all this time. But sewing has been a part of my life, and I've always been grateful to my mother for teaching me.
And you've been able to take that and use it to serve so many. We have some of your quilts in our home and other things that you've sewn for us. So I love that. As your group has done this, have you ran into any challenges or roadblocks over the years, or has it just kind of been a progressive thing that you've found what you needed to work on? You found the material, and it's always worked out.
I can't think of any real roadblocks that we've run into. We had to shut down for a year because of COVID, and it took us a while to get going again afterwards. But I can't think of any real roadblocks. It's just we've always been able to have the people we need and the materials that we need. And I think it's just because we have so many that are willing to serve, the Lord has just given us opportunities to be able to use that service. So.
That's great. So again, kind of switching up gears a little bit, for those that maybe have seen, I don't think it's too far stretched to say most of us have seen organizations asking for quilt donations or asking and serving and helping in different ways. For someone that's seen something like that, and they wanted to help or be a part of that, either by making something themselves or if they're not a sewer, wanting to contribute and help with that. Is there any advice you'd have for someone that's maybe seen something like that, been sparked with the idea or the thought to wanting to help with it, but they're not quite sure where to start or what to do? What advice or what things would you tell them they can help or be a part of?
Well, I didn't start this organization, and so I can't give you much advice on how to actually start something like this. I just joined after it was already started. But if you like to sew and you know of opportunities in your area that you would like to help, it's just very, very fulfilling. And I would suggest the website Just Serve, going on that and finding out if you like to make quilts, find out if there are any needs that are listed there. That's a good place to start. And the schools is also a good place to start. But and there are women that just do it on their own, just make quilts at home and donate them. But if you wanted to start a group and you know ladies that like to sew and are looking for that opportunity, then get together and form a group like ours and find where they're needed. And I think you can find it very, very fulfilling.
I know you mentioned yours started as like a church sponsored group, but it's grown to more of a community thing where you just have women from all over your community that have joined you.
Correct. Yeah, we have people from the community that have joined us over the years as we've done this. They find out about us and they want to come and be part of it, and we just welcome them. And so it is a community endeavor.
So what about those like me that don't sew, but they want to be part of something like this? Do you use people that don't have those sewing skills join and have things that they can contribute and help with your group?
Oh yeah, because we need fabric cut into squares of all different sizes. We need people to come and tie the quilts, which is very easy to learn to do. We need people to come and do things even as simple as ironing, so that when we cut the fabric, so it's all nice and smooth and makes it easier to cut. So there are several ways that people can help if they don't sew.
So if you're wanting to join a group like this, you don't have to say, I can't sew, I'm out. There's a lot you can do.
That's right.
That's great. Well, Judy, thanks so much for telling us. I asked to have you on the show because we're always hearing those stories and those things that your group is doing. And I think the thing that stands out the most to me as I've listened to those is I love how you've taken something that's been a passion for you your whole life and you figured out a way to share that with those around you. And I just think I love that. That's a great example for me, for my kids, for our family, and for those around you.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Thanks for having me and letting me express the love that I do have for sewing and the love that I do have for service. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us here today. So that was my mother-in-law, Judy Draper, or Grammy, as we all affectionately call her in our family. And I just love her. And I'm so thankful that she could come on and share a little bit more about this love of sewing and quilting that she's had. And she's blessed so many people's lives with it. We often hear stories as a family or see pictures of the organizations and people that have been given donations of these quilts that this group of hers makes. And I love that I could use this episode to share a little more about that with others outside of our family. So thank you so much for listening and for being here today. Also, she mentioned a site on there in her interview called Just Serve. It's a site that is a wonderful resource for anyone interested in volunteering in their communities. So you can find it at justserve.org. I will put it in the show notes for today's show. And you go on there, you can enter your city or your zip code, and it will pull up volunteer opportunities for a myriad of organizations and lots of different ways to volunteer within your community and right where you live. The ones she mentioned were sewing projects or things they donated to, and there's certainly a lot of those on there, but you can find others as well. So if volunteering in your community is something you've always wanted to do, that's something you can check out as well. So thanks so much for being here today, and we'll see you next time.